was bound to happen sooner or later, so you should get used to this now. There'll be a lot more before we're done.
She's right, you know, but let's get a third opinion. Malthael, what do you think?
No one can stop death.
Thanks, Malthael. The Cadence, a large, all-consuming mass that sometimes spawns monsters, has completely surrounded your kingdom, and in a matter of time, it will consume it, corrupt it, and kill everyone within. There is some good news, however. You happen to have a massive talking chalice that does 3 things. 1, makes you immortal, though you can't leave your throne, but you can see everything that happens in the world in your mind's eye. 2, the few people who are specially in tune to the chalice will be able to fight the Cadence, no matter where they come up in your kingdom. And 3, it has the ability to remove the Cadence in its entirety, but to do so requires years. A lot of years. 300 to be exact. Outside the initial setup, there's not much story here. Any other attempts at world building are done by random events that happen throughout the campaign, which don't really help much in that regard, and in the banter between the 2 personalities in the Chalice, who I happen to like as I find them amusing, but that being said, sort of like Borderlands humor, it will really depend on the person's taste.
Flawless victory! Drinks are on me tonight! If I could buy drinks. And if you could drink them.
I do enjoy your thought process.
Now in the game, there are 2 main modes to be dealing with. The ruler mode, when you manage the kingdom, I use the term kinda loosely, I'll explain that later, and the combat mode, where you command your units in combat, obviously, and we'll be talking about that one first, because it's the most practical. Combat will come to you very easily if you play the new XCOM games, Fire Emblem, maybe one of the Final Fantasy Tactics games, but mainly the newer XCOM. And I mean that in the sense that movement works the exact same way, you're commanding a squad of units who are very vulnerable, generally hit percentages are never a surefire hit, and generally the times that they are, usually involves putting someone in danger. In regards to units, you have 3 classes, and each one has 3 variants, so you definitely can argue that there is 9 classes in the game, though you only start with 3 at the start. First are the Caberjacks, who fight with giant battering rams that they call cabers. As you probably imagine, their attacks and skills generally involves them being in close proximity to the enemy, though let me make this clear, they are not a tank in any regard. They may get more HP, but they're just as vulnerable as any alchemist. Speaking of, alchemists are the glass cannons of the group, being able to do a lot of damage while also being very fragile. They fight using throwers, which are claw-like gauntlets, which allow them to throw flasks at enemies. These flasks explode on contact with enemies and do an AoE blast, making them very powerful and useful. There are 3 caveats though. 1, any alchemist will have a limited resource of these flasks. 2, their actual accuracy and range of these will vary, because the further you go with the throw, the less accurate it gets. 3, when an alchemist miss, they will really miss, as they will hit another area entirely, making it very possible you could hit an ally with friendly fire, so you have to be careful when using them. Lastly, there are the hunters, who are the most practical and traditional of the 3 classes. They fight with large crossbows, and their main specialties involve with picking off enemies from afar, or just doing damage from a safe distance, or utilizing their stealth capabilities when there's cover nearby to scout ahead. Then there are the actual personality and traits of your individual heroes, which will affect how they fight in combat. Certain characters, if they happen to be nearsighted, won't have very good accuracy. Others with Hawkeye, I believe, will allow them to have better accuracy. Some with a pack hunter trait will allow them to fight better with allies nearby. If a character happens to have asthmatic, if they dash, their whole movement speed will go down some if they do. Because of this, there are a lot of things to consider with your general hero deployment, and for when you start pairing up your heroes. More on that later. None of these classes are a dedicated tank, none of these classes have dedicated healing abilities to them, making battles incredibly dangerous for your heroes, especially considering that while the game will tell you what enemies you'll encounter, it won't tell you how many, where they are, and it won't even tell you where your heroes will spawn in the battlefield. Sometimes your heroes will literally spawn right next to enemies, and the enemies themselves can be incredibly dangerous as well, in the right circumstances. The ghostly lapse enemy will zap your hero's EXP if they're hit. The bulwark enemy, if he happens to get hit, will shield himself, nullifying any damage after that, unless you like hitting for 1. And even the basic seed enemy has lifesteal whenever it hits, and will get a pack hunter buff if he happens to be next to other seeds. All enemies will have special abilities like this, and you will have to maneuver your team accordingly to effectively defeat the enemy while not losing anyone. And any lapse of judgments will be punished. Whether it's heroes taking damage or heroes losing their life, the combat can be very unforgiving, though admittedly a bit simple. That being said, combat is really fun. It may not have an elevation or cover system like XCOM, It's still entertaining to maneuver your units, especially when you're effectively dispatching the enemy, and watching them get stronger with each generation. This is helped by the fact that as the game goes on, you'll start dealing with more difficult enemies, and they'll start attacking your own structures after a while. It's really fun as you feel your units and yourself getting better at the game as time progresses, even though you may have a failed file or two. Now, outside of combat, you'll be dealing with the Ruler's View. There you'll manage what the Chalice is researching and or building, your hero's bloodlines, and deal with random events that pop up during the campaign. First, the massive magical talking Chalice. As I said, it can research or build one thing at a time. The three things it can do are, well, 1. Build buildings, 2. Research items that your heroes can use, such as armor from the corpses of enemies, or items that will increase their accuracy, and lastly, adopt new heroes in case your ranks have to be a little thin. Now, the most interesting thing here is the buildings that it can build. It can only really build 3, but all of them are really important in one respect or another. First are the keeps, which are important to keep your bloodlines of your heroes going, so you'll have new heroes to fight off the next wave of cadence in the next generations to come. See, while your heroes are attuned to the Chalice, they are not immortal like you, so whether it's in combat or in old age, they will die eventually. So it's important for them to have children so that their children will grow up and be able to fight the cadence in their place, as they will be attuned to the Chalice just like their parents. Next is the Crucible, and that has to be managed by a hero so that the new trainees will be able to deal with the new wave of cadence as they come, by giving the trainees extra training, allowing them to transcend their predecessors. Next is the Sageite Guild, and they are used to speed up the research time on these projects. Though why they have to be managed by heroes, I don't really know, but you know, video game is video game. The Crucible and the Sageite Guild don't really require any real upkeep except to replace people who may die of old age working there. Keeps, on the other hand, do have to be managed on some level or another, as different heroes will have different compatibilities, and yes, heroes have to marry other heroes, and when they're in keeps, they can't go to combat ever. Same thing applies to the Sageite Guild and Crucible. Then, depending on who you appoint as head of the house and their class, and then who you appoint as their partner and their class, will determine the variant of class that their offspring will be. And the class variant will always be that of the head of the house. So hypothetically, if you have a Caberjack as a head of a house, and you have a Hunter as his partner, they will then have the Shadowjack variant, which will be Caberjacks that will have stealth capabilities similar to that of the Hunter. And then the personality and traits of the offspring will depend on who's the standard in the Crucible and who their parents are. As the offspring will inherit traits of their parents because of biological reasons, and along with some of their personality, they will also have a chance to get some of their personality traits of the standard in the Crucible. So all these things have to be managed accordingly. In the game, the Chalice says it doesn't want you to reduce all this to numbers, so frankly, I don't know, it's kinda hard not to. Trying to save the world, you know? It's especially hard not to when you consider the fact that a lot of these decisions will echo throughout your campaign for a good while. I've had times when I match people with bad partners, resulting in me having a lot of Caberjacks, and not many other classes, removing a lot of my strategic possibilities, which admittedly was due to my own lax decision making and inexperience. I've had fighters that were just outright bad. I've had a Caberjack once that was asthmatic and a drunkard, making it that he could only move 1 to 3 spaces on any given turn. Frankly, that was the worst fighter I ever really had. Gotta tell you, after botching that file, I don't really want to go through that again. Then, whenever the cadence attacks, unless it's attacking a particular structure, will always attack 2 areas at once. And if an area is not defended, it will get a stack of corruption. If it gets 3, the area will be lost forever. So there are even more big decision making echoing throughout the ages. But if you defend an area that happens to have corruption stacks, it will then heal a corruption stack if you defend it successfully. So it is possible to heal areas. Then there are the random events that happen throughout the game in the ruler view. That won't necessarily echo throughout the ages, but it'll either be a pat on the back or a kick in the shins depending on the outcome. Basically, seemingly at random, a paragraph and a half will appear in front of you and you'll be given multiple choices to answer with. The big issue that I have with this is that I don't know what the average day in this world is like, so a lot of the time it's literally just a guessing game. Though sometimes it's a bit more practical. One time an event came up where basically a hero was having complications with childbirth and you had to choose to save the baby or the hero. In another event, an example of a more vague one, an ostrich appears in front of your castle that's in danger. If you try to capture it, so you can save the species, it will snap its neck in a net unintentionally and you'll gain a stack of corruption in a different area. If you feed it, the hero that went to go feed it will gain the ostrich vision trait, increasing their sight range. If you let it be and just watch it, it will leave, but then a follow-up event will happen sometime later when it comes back with the mate, giving you 4 more answers to answer with. This can be a very cool mechanic, but like I said, it feels like I'm answering a question on a quiz for a class that I never took. Presentation-wise, well, it's unique to say the least. That being said, the visual presentation is kinda hit or miss for me, as I really like the monster designs, and the environment designs I like for the most part, though they seem flat at times. Though the human characters looking like slightly up-res virtual fighter characters is kinda debatable. Meanwhile, on the sound front, sound effects sound perfectly fine, and the soundtrack itself is very good, and I recommend giving it a listen, though how it's implemented is kind of weird in combat, because sometimes fights will start and will start with music, but after it places an initial run with the track, it will then cut off, and then you will be stuck with the ambient noises. And then after that, the music will start up again after you kill an enemy at some point. It's cool when it cuts back on, because it feels like it's congratulating you, like, yeah, keep it up, but that being said, it's kind of odd. And that's Massive Chalice. Would I recommend this game? Well, yes. While it has similarities to XCOM, it has enough of its own systems to be its own thing. In XCOM, if you have a good squad, you can spearhead an entire campaign, if you're good enough or if you play conservatively. In this game, if you have a good squad, they'll help you out for a while, but you have to figure out what you're going to do with them when they get older. Will you have them man to keep so they keep their bloodline going? Or will you have a siblings of theirs man to keep, while they work in a crucible to pass on their teachings to the next generation of fighters? There are a number of things to consider, and with fun combat and a very fun management system, I definitely feel it's worth the $20. My only real gripe I have with the game is that the whole random event system that I feel could be better. But in general, I definitely feel it's worth $20, and if you like XCOM, there's no reason for you not to give this a shot.
All good things require sacrifice.